Why don't you mind your own beeswax before my fist makes an appointment with your ass?
Eric, have you ever noticed that you're always talking about putting something up my ass? And that time it wasn't even a threat. Technically, that was flirting.
Out Cold is a 2001 American comedy film starring Jason London, A.J. Cook, Lee Majors, Zach Galifianakis, David Koechner, Victoria Silvstedt, and more. Let's take a quick look.
You all know the rules of King of the Mountain. The first one to the bottom with the most beer in your glass shall be proclaimed this year's King of the Mountain. Pushing, shoving, and cheating are encouraged. He is the greatest man I've ever known.
In a place where the thrill is all that matters. Rick Rambis and his friends are the best of the best. They know what they want.
I know that I'm in love with her. Have you told her this? No. You've got to. Carpe the diem. Seize the car.
And they're always willing
He's passed out. We'll put him in Rick's car. Might give him a heart attack.
to push things over the edge.
1, 2, 3. I'm not gonna lose you again. So, still wanna hook up?
You're gonna have to try a lot harder than that, Rick.
So, you still wanna hook up?
The competition is on.
Wish me luck. Guys, if this is gonna be it, let's make it count.
Out Cold.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. John here, flying solo, wanting to talk about 2001's Out Cold, directed by the Malloys, who are better known as music video directors. Directed videos for MXPX, Blink-182, like The Rock Show, and First Date, Crazy Town, Three Doors Down. You know, all your favorite late 90s to early 2000 bands, all the way up till it looks like they did like some Justin Timberlake and Vampire Weekend. I think was their last one in 2010. So these were not filmmakers. These were not filmmakers, basically. The Malloys did a documentary about Jack Johnson, surfing and all that. But yeah, this was their one kind of taking their shot in an actual feature film. And I mean, this thing was not received very well. It got an 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 22% on Metacritic. I mean, these are not great numbers. Had a budget of $24 million, so someone gave the Malloys $24 million to make this film. It lost $10 million. It made $14.8 million back. This is basically a complete bust. Showed that, you know, the Malloys never went on to try to make another one of these films again. They did do that documentary later, but this, even though it was critically panned and it wasn't the best film, I liked it. I thought it was so funny. I don't even think this qualifies as a cult film because I don't even think people liked it. I'm not going to start a whole new podcast calling it the guilty pleasure of film. This is the Cult of Films. It's my show, and I want to talk about Out Cold. So the funny thing is, the leading man in this film is Jason London, Jeremy London's brother. I didn't even really pick up on that there was two Londons. One of my favorite films of all time is Mallrats, which I'll probably talk about on this very show someday. I just felt like he was one of the worst actors, although he has that kind of dopey, boyish charm. I just thought that, Jeremy London was just not good. And so it's funny that I think back to my junior year of high school is when Out Cold came out back in 2001. And I'm like, wow, Jeremy London is at least kind of trying nowadays. Little did I know that Jason London was actually the one that I was watching. So I guess Jason is the better of the two London brothers acting wise. One great performance though was an early performance from Zach Galifianakis. When I saw this movie, I had no idea who he was. He was in Bubble Boy before this. I think he was in a couple films in smaller roles, but I just thought he stole the show. And if it wasn't for Zach Galifianakis, David Koechner, and Thomas Lennon, like the actual comedians of this movie, the jokes probably wouldn't have worked as well. So the Malloys saw something in this early, young troupe of comedians, and they put together this film where I think really holds up. This movie actually has some real laugh out loud moments, and for as far as comedies go, that's really hard to get a chuckle out of me when it's like meant to be funny, unless it's something like a dry humor like a Wes Anderson or like a John Waters film. Traditional comedies like Judd Apatow films around the same era that came out actually a little bit after this, it is kind of hard to pull laughs out of me unless it's like a Superbad, which is like a comedic masterpiece. But I was actually belly laughing a few times during this film. The film is set in Alaska in the ski resort of Bull Mountain, this group of misfits that work and live at the ski resort. But they do all have this kind of code centered around the founder of the mountain and the founder of the ski resort, Papa Muntz, played by Louis Arquette, the father to all the Arquette children. This film came out in 2001. He actually died in 2001, so this film was released post-mortem, but it was fun to see him in a little bit of flashbacks. Lee Majors moves into town. He is this kind of corporate, skeezy businessman, and he's trying to buy the mountain and the resort from Ted Muntz, played by Willie Garrison, trying to transform this into the next Aspen. Rick is the kind of the leader of the group. Jason London's character, he kind of buys into the Kool-Aid a little bit because Lee Majors' character, whose name is John Majors, it's kind of funny that they just kept the last name, but John Majors kind of takes a liking to him and kind of appoints him like the manager and has him show him around the resort. Much to the dismay of the rest of the crew, he just starts taking note of all these crazy shenanigans that go on with this group. He starts implementing drug tests, and that's basically like the main storyline is John Majors' plot to take over, turn this little sleepy town into this gross kind of corporate conglomerate, and the kind of pushback that he gets from the denizens that were already there. The other kind of through plot line is Rick Rambis has, there has to be a romance, of course, and he has this kind of flirting romance with Jenny, who is played by A.J. Cook, which you might know from the movies like Final Destination. She's really into him, but he's kind of hesitant with his feelings because he's kind of pining over this girl named Anna, played by Carolyn DeVarnis. She's best known for Hannibal and Off the Map. So they had this kind of fling in Mexico, and they had this like perfect week. It looks like they were like meant to be together, but then on like the last day, she kind of stands him up and leaves without, doesn't even give him like a Dear John, just kind of takes off. And of course, what are the chances? Who shows up in the tiny little town in, random ski town in Alaska? But Anna, of course, the girl that he just happened to meet, while he was vacationing in Mexico. She shows up to throw, the monkey wrench, basically. She's kind of the wedge in between Rick and Jenny's relationship, or, burgeoning relationship. So when we get introduced to Anna's stepsister, Inga, who is played by Victoria Silvstedt. I mean, Victoria Silvstedt in 2001, like I said before, that was, I was a junior in high school. She was, yeah. So she plays kind of like the token hot chick where, she's definitely like the best looking thing that any of these small town folk have seen. So that plays as a kind of a funny MacGuffin for the rest of the guys there. They're all kind of stepping over each other, try to gain Inga's affections, which in fact turns out to be some of the funniest moments of this film. It's funny that the Malloys were such prominent music video directors, because this movie is like the equivalent of band as like a Lit or like a Sum 41, which Sum 41 is prominently played throughout the score or the soundtrack of this film. It just has that, this movie is like, it's like pop punk incarnate into a film. You get a lot of footage of actual like pro snowboarders and skiers doing a lot of tricks and flips, and it's supposed to be the actors, but it's actually their pro athlete stunt doubles. So you do get a lot of pause for just kind of really cool trick time. It almost plays like a skate video or a snowboard video in between the comedic moments. But I think it really works. Derek Hamilton, who is Luke's brother, played by Zach Galifianakis, he is just like the village idiot, but I just like Like, usually those kind of characters don't really have a lot of depth, and I mean, I guess Pigpen doesn't either. For some reason, like, his line delivery, he's just, like, so genuine and so, like, so lost. Like, this guy plays just, like, lost, like, man-child, you know, this like 8-year-old stuck in this like 20-year-old's body so well. I thought he was absolutely hilarious. It's really funny too, because you look up Derek Hamilton, like, he has almost no acting credits to his name. I know he was in Disturbing Behavior, which is another one of my favorite kind of smaller cult films, and he was in this, and so you have that, you know, he could do, you know, I guess drama, like cheesy teenage, you know, young adult drama, like in Disturbing Behavior. Has some comedy chops, and I think it worked really well. Some of the things don't really hold up as far as some of the jokes go. John Majors is constantly calling Ted Muntz a retard throughout the entire movie, and even back then, like, it was getting a little old. Watching it now, I'm just like, ooh, it's kind of like a facepalm moment with, like, today's social climate. It's just like, that's one of those words that you don't really want to hear thrown around, and they throw it around all willy-nilly. Like, he is constantly calling Ted Muntz a retard during the entire movie. But for the most part, it is a really funny film. Like, David Koechner, it just, like, steals every scene he's in, especially, like, it's, like, great when he and Zach Galifianakis are in the scenes together, which is there's a very memorable hot tub scene. Well, it's memorable because it's Victoria Silvsted's in the hot tub, but then it gets really funny when, you know, she kind of exits and it's Zach Galifianakis interacting with David Koechner. David Koechner plays like the handyman of the resort, completely wasted. Like, he's even drinking like pool cleaner and chasing it with limes. Just he's completely lost it. He's like the poster child of huffing too much gasoline. I think that the Malloys just kind of let him riff a lot, and that's what this movie feels like. It feels like a lot of riffing, more so for, you know, I don't think Jason London's really riffing. I think he's probably sticking to the script, and just barely. Like, when Thomas Lennon and Zach Galifianakis are kind of having their back and forths, I believe a lot of that's probably improv, or David Koechner. One of the best parts of this film is the credits, because it goes into like a great gag reel, and half of it is just David Koechner and Zach Galifianakis just riffing line after line after line. This film has so many lines in it that I still say to this day, and then I'll even forget where it came from. He used to say "loving it strong" like all the time, and then I was rewatching this the other day and I'm like, oh my god, that's where it came from. Or "it's really squishing my numbers, it's no mystery." Like, all these little things that I thought I was just really clever and came up with is actually from Out Cold. So as far as the main plot line goes, it's pretty much your standard fare of it's like two things put together: evil corporate entity moving in, and the resistance, and then also the kind of love triangle. None of that is breaking new ground. It's just the way that it's delivered. It's kind of the package that's really funny. Just watching this group of individuals kind of stumble through the scenes, like literally stumbling through the scenes. One of the ongoing themes is Zach Galifianakis basically blacks out drunk every single night, and the rest of the group find out different ways to just torture him, putting salt on his crotch and leaving him out in the snow for a polar bear to come find him and fillet him, to throwing him in the driver's seat of a car, everyone jumping in, having the townsfolk kind of spin the car in the ice, and then screaming to wake him up and like freak him out and pretend like he was driving. It really tries to have that story, that through plot line. It tries to have an actual structure, but the best parts about it are those in between scenes, and it does have these like little skit one-offs, and I think that's the best part of the film. There's nothing to talk about visually, like from a visual standpoint, you know, aside from some of the snowboarding scenes. Like, there's a guy that jumps out of a helicopter on top of a mountain and all that's great, but again, it's nothing that you wouldn't see in like your standard fare snowboarding video, so it's not like they broke any new ground. There's a lot of like fade cuts. It seems very, very amateurish. Some good action sports, you know, thrown in there for good measure. So, you know, did it break any new ground cinematically? Absolutely not. It feels kind of like an elongated episode of like a Saturday Night Live, full of skits, full of great comedians riffing off each other. You know, give credit where credit's due. That goes to the Malloys. They probably realized that they were very inexperienced and they had all these comedians at their disposal, so they just kind of turned them loose and said, hey, let's just make a movie. Let's see what happens. And I think the end result, although it was critically panned and probably not even liked by a lot of the audience, I think turned out pretty well. well. It also really seemed disjointed as far as what rating they were going for, because they push nudity like right up to the edge where you almost see like an ass crack, or there's a lot of side boob in this and like under boob, but there's absolutely no nipples or you know, any full frontal nudity whatsoever. Same goes for the language. Like, I think Lee Majors said shit once, but aside from that, it's pretty PG as far as the language goes. So it's like, I think they really want, like, the Malloys probably really wanted to make an R film, and it probably would have been a lot funnier and a lot better if they were allowed to kind of go that extra step. But I think the studio was just like, nah, we don't, you know, we're going to give you $24 million, which is not nothing as far as, you know, kind of unproven filmmakers go, but we're just not, you know, we probably want to pander to the younger audience too, that younger, you know, because that was the generation that was watching skate videos and snowboarding back in 2001, so they probably wanted to get all those, you know, 13-year-olds in there, all those teenagers, take their equally, you know, pubescent, you know, girlfriends and boyfriends to go see this you know, action sports comedy. Some of the things, though, like, it does kind of tote the line. Like, I'm surprised that it got away with some things. Like, there's a scene where they're doing a drug test, and everyone's kind of putting their urine cups on the table, and then one of the characters puts a cup, and it has a full turd sticking out of it. So I guess you could get away with that in PG-13, but it does feel at some points where they really try to get to an R, or they just got to that R and then had to cut it, you know, like a second after. The movie ends like you would expect a movie like this to end, kind of, you know, without giving specific spoilers away, like, you know, you're worried about me spoiling a snowboarding comedy. You know, good guys win. Love kind of prevails in a different way. I kind of threw a curveball there where they didn't go the, I mean, extreme obvious route, even though it was still pretty by the numbers. Like I said, the storyline is very paint by the numbers. They just needed a reason to get all these crazy people together to make jokes and to have cool snowboarding footage and to make a very enjoyable movie, in my opinion. It's actually a hair under 90 minutes. It has an 89-minute runtime, so it's not even technically a feature film. But you know, it's 89 minutes of your life. If you're in a bad mood or want to feel nostalgic for those, you know, Sum 41, Blink 182, you know, memories, just too old and crusty to jump back on that snowboard or skateboard, then go check Out Cold. I think the jokes really hold up, aside from, you know, Lee Majors calling that guy a retard every 2 seconds. But for the most part, I think it's a fun movie. It's brainless. Put it on in the background and you be the judge. Am I crazy? Sometimes I just like that kind of lower denominator. Still think it's at least on par with like a 40-year-old virgin, or I think this movie's way funnier than like The Hangover. Like, this is best Zach Galifianakis, maybe my favorite performance from him as Luke. This is best David Koechner. It's as good as his Anchorman performance. I think he's hilarious in this. Best Lee Majors? No, probably not. But I mean, Lee Majors is very entertaining. Best Jason London. I mean, that's a bar, right? That's a really low bar. But thank you once again for joining me for another episode of The Cult of Films. I really hope that you're enjoying this series as much as I enjoy making it. If you want to listen to it in podcast form, you could do so by going to Spotify, iTunes, all the other podcasting outlets. We are there. Keep supporting the video format by giving us a thumbs up, sharing it on social media, just telling people that we exist and that we like talking about films. If you want to talk to me about Out Cold, any cult films, or any other films in general, you could find me on Twitter at OrzovDunn. And until next time, don't go changing. So the Malloys did a documentary. What the fuck? So the Malloys... So the Malloys did a documentary. I'm so happy. So the Malloys...